Welcome to an episode of the PIK, and today we've got, I want to say world famous Richard Pike, but you know, you're pretty well known in recovery. You've been around, you know, coming up on a couple of decades, you know, not far off that. And yeah, it feels like a bit of a privilege, you know, to have you in my life personally, but to know you and then to be invited out to work with you. You know,
Thank you, Dan.
I'm really lucky.
It's a privilege too to have you in my life, mate.
No, thank you. And I love the vibe between us. You know, we don't hold back from each other, but it's kind of forgotten in the moment, you know, and we're really honest with each other.
It certainly carries its own trauma responses, right?
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, you know, and we'll go through the usual format, and then whatever you say, you know, we'll pull out some questions, you know, and feel free to answer what you want to answer, and if stuff you want to kind of don't feel comfortable sharing, you know.
There's not so much that I don't. Thanks for saying that, Dan. There isn't a lot that I don't feel comfortable with. It's about where's the right arena to do that, and is it benefiting the people that we're talking to on, you know, on YouTube? Is it going to benefit people on Jay's live? You know, it's like all the time it's about adding value, but it's also just being mindful of where we're taking ourselves, you know.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So and I know a little bit about you, but not everyone at home knows about you in terms of, you know, what life was like growing up, you know. So talk to me about kind of young Richard Pike, you know, growing up. What was it like? It was fairly tough for you, I know that.
Yeah.
You know, tell me about that.
Okay, so I was born in Lincolnshire, and I'm 57 years old. It feels really old. I feel old when I say that, you know, even though I feel like I'm young at heart and young in mind, you know. But the earliest childhood memory I have is my dad coming down one morning after drinking alcohol excessively the night before, probably still drunk, and for no reason at all. As a child, I was 2 years old, sitting on the floor playing cars, going like this with a car, vroom, vroom, and he just screamed at me.
Wow.
And he was like, shut up, what the fuck, you know, going on like this. And I don't remember the language, but I remember the fear in me at that time. And it was almost like, I guess the message that I took on at that time is that I'm not able to be heard and I'm not able to be validated, even though I know that logically as an adult. As a child, we don't have logic till we get to a certain age. So everything that's happening in our surroundings, we're making personal.
Yeah.
You know, and so my mum left my dad when I was 2 years old, and just not long after that event, he used to beat my mum up.
Okay.
So
She take you with her?
yeah, okay. Yeah. Me and my mother and my older sister, we went to my grandma's house. And my grandma at that time had built a bungalow with my granddad, and both of them, they both laboured and laid the bricks and did everything, you know, and it was a nice house. It was a really nice house for that time. But I didn't come from a rich background, you know. So I lived at my mum's up until that age, and at 6 years old, we then went to go live in our own house. And my mother was very poor, struggling. You know, there was times I remember going to school with holes in my shoes. And I also remember having for dinner like a sandwich and half a beaker of milk, you know, out of a beaker that was chewed around the edges. And we didn't know what it was like to have money, so there was no carpets on the floor, and my mum used to have to wipe all the walls down with detergent and Dettol in order just to try and make it clean. Yeah. And that's how it was. And so I guess part of my growing up was about wanting more, but it wasn't wanting more because it was about an addiction. It was about I had a response I had to my childhood, you know. And then at the age of 6 years old, my mum got into a relationship. My mum was 26 and her then partner was 18, you know. And it feels weird to say that because, you know, it's like I'm speaking about a young boy coming to father me.
Yeah.
You know, but I was 6 years old. So, and I, you know, as an adult, I can logically say now, because I've forgiven him, we've had conversations, you know, I can say now that he was a young boy. He was only being with me how his parents had been with him.
Yes.
I don't blame him. You know, I don't blame my mum either. You know, there's no good with blame. Blame's useless. You know, but there was events during my childhood that were upsetting, and I remember feeling tremendous sadness. And because I am a child and we have responses as a child, what you call in cognitive behavioural therapy is like a core belief, you know, or in
core belief
social
systems.
media world, a limiting belief, right? And I had all these things. So all these messages I was getting from my from my father, my real father, then this guy coming into my life, was that I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, and you know, and I'm different on some level. And I'll try to keep this short because I know there's plenty of questions, but at that age, what happens is all of us, all human beings, because I've worked with over like 1,500 adults and maybe 700 young people all over the world in different capacities, right? And I used to lead personal development courses over the weekend where people would have to stand up on a microphone and talk, from judges to police to social workers to probation officers to factory workers to shopkeepers to, you know, many different people from many forms of life. And I've never ever met anybody yet given the right information that's never had a core belief about themselves.
Right, okay.
Now, you say, well, okay, well, what does that mean? I mean, that's no big deal, right? The issue is that the core belief, the decision we make from early childhood memories of I'm unlovable, I'm not good enough, I'm worthless, I'm dirty, I'm stupid, whatever that might be, is that we then go out into the world growing up looking through these lenses and listening through a filter. Yeah. Everything in the world that's happening around us, our response in terms of our relationships to people, is coming back through this lens of I'm not good enough and I'm unlovable. And we're hearing through this filter, I'm not good enough and I'm unlovable. And therefore the world becomes a really horrible place to live in.
Is it distorted cognitive belief or distorted cognition? Or, am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
And,
you know,
and we just take on all the core belief systems, you touched on it there. We become what people tell us we are.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, if we're a naughty child, we'll be a naughty child. That's what we're told. We take on that belief. You know, along with lots of other beliefs, we're unlovable. There's no, we call it in the therapy world, unconditional positive regard. There's only conditional positive regard.
Yeah.
You know,
do this and I'll give you this. You
absolutely.
do that and you'll get that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we turn up and then you know, we could even go as far as to say that I certainly know from my own experience as a child, I didn't really care where I got attention, good or bad. I didn't care. So, you know, I just wanted attention. If I was getting a good eye, then I was getting attention. You know, and it didn't feel good at the time. That certainly wasn't the outcome I wanted to achieve when I set out to do it. But, you know, even as I kind of took on the mantle as the naughty kid, felt good, you know, hardest boy in the year, all that bullshit, do you know what I mean?
Well, in them situations, Dan, it's very difficult because, you know, as an adult, it's very easy logically to say this is what we did this for, this is what we did that for. But at that time, having no awareness, we didn't actually know what we was doing.
Yeah.
What we was doing was just doing what we was doing.
Yeah.
What it is learnt behaviour. So we learn how to survive in the world we exist in. And when I say the world we exist in, what I mean is this world. I mean the world in which our head exists. In the Talmud, it says, we do not see things as they are, we see them as we are.
Yes.
We do not hear things as they are, we hear them as we are. These are the glasses and the lens I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So we're just responding to the world in which we've devised within ourselves, within our mind, within our body. And so all we're doing is reacting to our external all the time because of the inner built. It's a crazy thing, Dan, but the mind doesn't subtract or divide. You know, what the mind does is it adds and it multiplies.
Okay.
So it means that we're not ever taking away what it is that we've programmed in. We learn other ways of dealing with it. We learn other ways of being with it. But in general, what we're doing is we program ourselves. The brain is like a computer. And so all the information we're getting as a child and what we're getting as an adult, we're just programming, like on a keyboard, you know? Program. This now goes into our neurology. And our neurology, I'm talking about neuroplasticity. And so we start having responses to the programming. what that means is when I think this, when I feel that, what I do is, and then there's an outcome. And what I learned to do for many years was drink and use drugs.
Okay. I was going to come to that. How old were you when you first picked up drugs?
11.
11 years old.
11, yeah. It was very normal in my household to have drugs. When my stepdad came along, we were Asian hippies. They were. Yeah. Afghan coats, long hair. Every Friday and Saturday night in my house, everyone. It was funny because I was listening to what Jay was saying there, and he was saying, "I wish my mum and dad had been the cool mum and dad." Yeah. Well, I was that. I did have that cool mum and dad that everybody wanted, if you understand what I mean. Yeah. Everyone would be sat there smoking weed, you know, doing whatever they were doing, and it was like, and I was amongst all this, and I remember one of my friends coming around, and he goes, "Do you know what your mum and dad's doing?" And he was a bit more mature than me at that age, and I went, "No, what are they doing?" He said, "They're smoking weed." I was like, "Really?" Yeah. I said, like, "Right, where can I get hold of some of this stuff then?"
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so I remember I went searching, and I found some, and I don't, you know, but it was all very usual in my house. Yeah, that's all I want to say. Yeah. You know, like I'm talking. Yeah, let's put it this way: there was a supply the whole time, and I mean from oil. Pure cannabis resin that even back in the 70s was £15 a gram, right up until, you know, and again, I mean, look, do you know something? It would have been rude if I hadn't used.
Yeah, they would have looked at you with suspicion.
Well, I mean, it was being rude, right? Everybody else around me was doing it.
Yeah, everyone not to.
Yeah.
So there's that progression, isn't it? Progression, you know, and I know Jay talked about it on another podcast. You know, the progression of substances, behaviours, substances, and kind of, you know. So when did you pick up heroin? Because you were a prolific heroin user, weren't you?
Yeah.
And crack cocaine.
Yeah.
Intravenous injector.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I say prolific, you know, just to give me and Rich a cut from the same cloth. So groin injecting, arm injecting, you know, you were well in all them places. And you know, and what that does to us, man, is it kills us.
It destroys us. I mean, you know, like there's the drugs that's killing us from a physical level, and then there's the world in which we exist and the behaviours that's killing us on an emotional and spiritual level. So it's like the drugs are just, you know, I mean, look, this is the thing about drugs, right? You know, and especially like for the video and for Jay's podcast. Many of us talk about drugs as being a bad thing. Right? Now, let's imagine that addiction is an illness, right? Let's imagine it's a disease or my thinking puts me at dis-ease. Actually, the drugs that I sought, right, for a long time was my solution to my problem. You know, because the problem was never the drugs. The problem was what I was suffering from that manifested in drug using, you know? So the problem wasn't the drugs, the problem was my mind, the problem was my spirit, was my emotions, was the way I viewed the world, how I felt about myself, you know, low self-esteem, feeling uncomfortable in the world, you know, believing that I wasn't wanted, wasn't loved, wasn't cared for. And by the way, you know, these things, we've got to remember, these are core beliefs. It's not what people was doing to me. The funny thing is, Dan, right, is like, you know, when we talk about the progression of addiction, very often we talk about smoking weed, then we go on to acid, then we take amphetamines, then we take heroin, then we take crack cocaine. That's really not a progression of addiction. That's finding another drug to replace the one that stopped working. Yes. The progression of addiction is how the intensity within myself is getting so difficult, so hard, that to be without a drug to find a solution to turn down the volume in my mind becomes very painful.
Yeah.
So if addiction is obsession, compulsion and self-centered fear, the progression in terms of addiction is the louder the noise, the bigger the fear, the crippling anxiety, the obsessional thoughts that override all other thoughts. You know, and so that's my progression of my addiction. And what happened is my drugs got harder to deal with the progression of my mental health.
Until they no longer work.
Until they no longer work. Look, do you know something that's so painful? That when you're going out in the day and you're hurting people and you're hurting yourself, to get money to find drugs to put into your body, and you get home and you do this and nothing happens, It's
Horrible.
like, when I think about that, you know, it makes me emotional. Do you know what I mean? That for years and years and years, I sought drugs to get out of me because the pain was so immense, and yet I spent more time trying to get enough to get out of myself. Like there was never enough. It stopped working.
Yeah.
The volume in my head was still there. You know, like I was saying on my live earlier, the volume, when we're talking about the volume, you know, when you wake up in the morning, welcome to Radio Negative, and here we go, broadcasting for the day. Oh, I don't want to do this. Looking at what's right, what's wrong rather than what's right, what isn't working rather than what's working. You know, the world looks like a really cruel place. My life isn't as good as everybody else's. Look at social media, they're all in Thailand, I'm here doing this. You know, it's like that on steroids, you know, until until you find a solution.
Yeah.
And all I was doing by using the drugs, using the substance, was just trying to turn down the volume, so eventually it went like this, and all of a sudden I couldn't do it no more, and it went like that.
Yeah.
And so I went from this place of dis-ease into ease.
Yeah.
Ease. Just now, just ease, you know?
So, and I know, you know, I know your story. I know a bit. I don't know all of it. You know, I always find new stuff out about you. But you've done a few jail sentences as a result of using
Yeah.
it. Yeah. How many jail sentences?
6.
6 jail sentences in.
That's outside of the remand, yeah.
Yeah, and there's like moments in them jail sentences when we just got we know like this. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
There's I don't know. For me, you know, when I went to jail and I saw, you know, guys on the landing, they were high-fiving. One guy had a PlayStation and an Xbox, man. He thought he was king of the wing. You know, one guy was cooking a tuna curry in his flipping kettle. You know, and I was like, you know, and I was just like, why are these people so happy here, man? Like, I
Yeah.
was miserable in jail.
Yeah, yeah, I was too. I'm not even too sure that they wasn't, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's bravado, isn't it? Most of
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
I mean, I think there is such a thing as institutionalised and getting used to a particular lifestyle, because I do remember when I was, my first sentence, prison sentence, when I was 17. Yeah, and by the time I was 21, before I got starred up, and I went into my last 12 months from a teenager into an adult, and I'd done 5 sentences in that short period of time. Only short ones, 2 6 months, 2 9 months, and 1 12 month.
Yeah.
And then when I became an adult, I got a 2-year sentence for possession with intent to supply drugs, and robbing tills as well, which is a whole other story, which falls into a point of where I used up until the age of 21, but in that time, in 1989 almost, the rave scene was just hitting. And so I'd used all heroin and da-da-da. I ended up in a rehab in 1989, and then came out to the beginning of the rave scene.
Yeah.
Now in them days, they didn't promote abstinence. They didn't know about, you know, I didn't know about fellowships. I didn't know about not using anything. And you used to have to apply for a drinks license. I mean, it's crazy when I think about it now. It was harm reduction. It was break you down and build you back up again. You know, and look, there was some very good stuff come out of there. I'm not blaming none of them. They were doing the best with what they had at that time, right? It was just how it was.
Yeah.
You know, we're going back a long time now. You know, but anyway, I came out and of rehab, and the rave scene was there. And all my mind could think about is, well, if I go on this rave scene, then I'm not using. You know, I'm not using heroin and crack. But I didn't think like that. I just thought, if I'm on the rave scene, everyone else is doing it, I'm doing good. I'm okay. The problem is I took me on there, because it wasn't about the rave scene. The problem was me, as the problem was me before.
Yeah.
So where I am doesn't matter, because the problem's going with me, because it's not about people, places and things, it's about me.
Yeah.
And I took that onto the rave scene, and I made a bit of money for a little while. There was a group, there was 4 of us who used to hang around. There was 2 black guys and 2 white guys. You know, my ego was going high, and I'd pull up in this BMW 525i thinking I was all this. You know, self-esteem still battered.
Shit,
you know,
on the
thinking
floor, man, almost. Yeah.
on the floor. Yeah, no program, no awareness, just bundling my way through life in the best way I could. You know, pretending I was somebody. Turn up at the rave, let off a few pills, a bit of coke, a bit of this, a bit of that, a bit of this. Ooh, look, there's Richard. We need Richard, not, you know. And don't get me wrong, I had a bit of money. You know, I had a bit of money. I drove a nice car. I used to have women all the time. You know, like, it was great. Sitting in a rave, I mean, it was like the rebirth of Woodstock. you know, the rave scene.
Yeah.
Like really, you know, sitting in a club, sitting on the stairs, and all of a sudden you just feel somebody come up and start massaging you on the shoulders, you know. And it was just like, woohoo, I've arrived, you know. And I felt like I had arrived, but the problem was, is like, I stayed on that scene for about 2 years, and I got 2 years in jail. And but what happened while I was on that scene is my addiction was alive. And what happened is I then had to start mapping out where I could find a rave going on every night of the week.
Yeah.
That's what it became. And I would leave Sheffield and I would drive to Doncaster, Worksop, Retford, Newark, Nottingham, you know. And and basically just turning up because it was my excuse to be able to use rather than face the fact, listen, you've got a problem, mate. Nobody else does this, only you.
Yeah.
But when I was in them raves, I used to think everyone was doing it.
Yeah.
When I used to see people out their head and I was out my head, I thought, yeah, we all do this. It's a great time. The problem was they went home and they went to work. Not me, mate.
Yeah.
I'm like 7 days a week.
So when you, because I know when I was serving up, I was selling drugs, you know, for people at home that don't know what that is, you know, I'd be at them parties or whatever. Yours was slightly different to mine, but I was thinking, although I was having a good time, you know, and I had dough coming in and all, and I was, you know, I had a good supply of drugs. I was thinking, so I'm a young man, maybe 24, 25. I'm thinking, I need another plan because I can't do this forever.
Dan, I can't look. It doesn't matter what I had or where I was. Right, I always felt like I didn't fit in my own skin.
Yeah.
And I felt uncomfortable. I had low self-esteem and a very large ego. It was the only thing that saved me. You know, it's like I just felt like unlovable inside. I really had a sense of not being good enough and feeling different to other people around me, you know.
Yeah.
And I was carrying that no matter where I went, no matter what I drove, no matter what I wore, no matter what, you know. And it was just uncomfortable, man. And I knew even before going to jail at the age of 16 when I was hanging around with the junkies, because when I started using drugs, there was no needle exchanges, by the way.
No.
You had to share a needle between many of you.
Right.
All the older lot all died of AIDS. And I say AIDS because they got HIV and they all died, you know, because there was no tablets then to maintain you on HIV. It was like you went to HIV and then blew up with AIDS. You know, the younger ones all got hepatitis C. But listen, even before I was on that scene, I knew, what you're doing here. Yeah. I could feel it inside. It wasn't me. I was intelligent. I knew I had something to give. And here I was running around doing things and hurting people and hurting myself. And I knew that my life was destined for something else, but I just couldn't get out of it. Because without being in that world, I didn't believe I had enough about me to be anywhere else. Because my esteem was on the floor. I'd battered myself through my own thinking from being a young kid, the age of 6-year-old. Always had this sense of, remember when I was on about earlier program, can you imagine, right, that for every day of your life, you make a decision at the age of 6-year-old, you go out into the world, right, thinking about, I'm unlovable, I'm not good enough, and that tape recorder plays itself for the next 40, 50 years.
I know it, I hear it.
You know?
I still hear the voices that, you know, my granddad would be one of them, you know, some of the stuff he said to me, God rest his soul, I love him. But and it's only when we come into recovery that stuff motivates us.
Absolutely, it was the pain that drove me here, Dan, you know, like, I remember getting up in the morning some mornings and I knew that I had to go and use, right, because I was physically dependent, right? And I would sit on the end of my bed and I'd cry. And I would just going, please God, get me out of this. I don't want to do this no more, help me, you know? And it was like, and it was awful. It's like, if you imagine the spirit in you is like a flame, right? And this flame's just going,
just dying.
And it's just waiting for someone to go, whew, and then poof, and you're just gone. And it was like, and I lived in a rock bottom for like 7 years. I didn't hit a rock bottom and it propelled me into recovery.
No.
I dragged myself through a rock bottom for about at least 7 years, you know, and got up and turned up for life, turned up for using. And like, if there's anybody out there and you think that recovery is a pain in the ass and it's something you have to go do, for doing an hour and a half in the day for your own well-being, for your own esteem, it's a gift to have the time to be able to do that, because When I was using, I had no time to do anything but use.
Other than use, yeah.
And if I have the time to do that and I can't take an hour in my day or an hour and a half in my day, but look, you know, I'm not perfect today. You know, I'm perfectly imperfect. That's what I am. Yeah. And it's really, it is fundamental to healing, by the way, because I acknowledge that I've got some things to do and I've got some work to do on myself. I acknowledge that. I take it on 100%, right? Without a shadow of a doubt. But it's really important at the same time, as I was saying to people on Jay's live before this, that we give ourselves a break.
Yeah.
You know, there's that line in the text in the fellowship, and it says, "We didn't become addicted in one day, so remember, easy does it."
I want to come back to that. So just tell me about. I want to come back to the things you need to work on. You know, just because I'm always interested. But before we get there, tell me about your first experience of recovery. When was that like? You said there wasn't, you know, your rock bottom didn't propel you, but...
Well, it did in the end, because I lived in it.
Yeah, when was the moment when you gone, okay, I'm fucked?
I was in a relationship with a girl called Sam, and she's dead now, bless her. She died after I'd been in recovery a few years. We were together for 7 years, and the relationship was dysfunctional, like, really. You know, we were addicted to each other like we was the drugs. You know, there was actually no sex in that relationship, if I'm honest, for the last few years.
There never is there in the end? You know, there never is in the end?
It's funny because I talk to some guys and they go, yeah, and I was doing this and I was doing that, and we were, you know, and the drugs propelled my sex life. I thought, well, you're a better guy than me, mate. Because like when I smoked crack, I couldn't find it. You know what I mean? And it's like, and then taking heroin as well. Like the last thing I want to be able to do is have an orgasm. Do you know what I mean?
It's just like interest in it.
No interested. Yeah, you know, my love of my life was drugs. You know, so yeah. The question. Sorry, Dan. Just pull me back.
Yeah. So the question. Your first experience of recovery.
Right. Okay. So I was with this girl for 7 years, and one day what happened is we were very good at making money together, right? And I went out, and for about the 4th time I got caught doing something with her, right? And I was so scared of going back to jail. I thought, I can't do this no more. I just can't do it. You know, I remember the flame inside of me was flickering, and I don't know what happened. Call it a God moment, call it a spiritual awakening, call it being in the right place at the right time. But I went to go see my probation officer, right? And my probation officer said to me, how are you? And I just broke down crying.
Wow.
And I just broke down crying, and I just
said, told me this story.
I just said, I said, please help me. Yeah. You know, like,
did you say they must have been in recovery themselves, or something worse?
She wasn't. She was a straight go with this woman. But the thing is, Dan, I was like, I'm not lying, I was 8 stone. I was about 8 stone and I was yellow. I'd had Hep C, remember, before they even knew what Hep C was. Yeah. And my body was dying. I'd got scarring on my liver, you know, and it was like, and I walked in her office and I said to her, please help me. I just said, I need to go to rehab. She goes, Richard, I'm off on leave. I said, no, please. I said, fill the paperwork out now. And she goes, are you sure? I said, fill it out now. And I had no conversation with Sam, the girl I was with, before this. It just happened in that moment in that office. And the lady, bless her heart, she went and got the paperwork and she filled it out with me. And I say this just for no other reason, right? But I think I was fortunate. And the reason I was fortunate is because I was a nightmare, Dan. I believe that the police and the panel in Sheffield wanted rid of me. They wanted rid of me. Like my pictures were up everywhere, in all the back shops and everything. You know, like to be aware, and like because I was just a nightmare, mate. You know, and I'm not proud to say that, but it's my truth. And 1 week later, after filling that paperwork in, I got an okay. You can go. Wow. I think they thought I was going to die. They had me on about 120, 150. I can't quite remember, but one white beaker like that full of methadone a day, 70 mil of Valium, and 350 mil of amitriptyline I was prescribed. And this, I tell you what, this is really important, right? Because you know, like Jay, you mentioned connection with Jay, right? So there's 2 fundamentals for recovery, I believe: connection and meaning and purpose.
Yes.
And the thing was, you see, is like addiction can't just be managed by another drug and expect a person to stop. We have to have meaning and purpose along with that, and I'll tell you why. Because my meaning and purpose was getting up in the morning and finding ways of means of getting more. Yep. Right? You now give me a prescription, don't matter how much you're going to give me, I'm going to get up in the morning and I've got no life, mate. Yeah. What am I doing? Watching Jerry Mikhail and drinking coffee. Do you know what I mean? You know, I mean, really.
Yeah.
You know, and my life was, I used to buzz off this thing, even though I hated it, I used to buzz off
It
it.
was meaning and purpose.
You know.
Yeah.
And so I'd get up on these prescriptions, I'd go use, even with all that down my neck, I'd still go score, and then I'd go back and they'd think that they hadn't given me enough, so they'd give me more. And this is the misunderstanding, is that they didn't understand them little elements that you need. Prescribing, look, I'm in support of that if it pulls a person into recovery. I'm, you know, even though I'm part of a 12-step and I promote where possible abstinent-based recovery,
Yeah.
I also want to say that prescribing is a part of recovery. It's not separate to it. I remember having debates, right, with people when I was a lead in CGL, yeah, and they used to talk about this polarised debate between harm reduction and recovery. And I used to say, I don't understand why we're having polarised debates. They're actually part of the same journey. You come into the service, you get prescribed, somewhere along the line you might hear something that then puts you into this journey called recovery.
Yes.
But they're not separate. They're a part of the same
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And then the ongoing recovery. You know, so that was my journey, you know. But yeah, that
See,
one day in the probation office was a spiritual awakening, mate.
Yeah, man.
It was a gift of desperation.
That's like a God moment, like, you know.
Absolutely.
You know, a moment when we look back at our lives and say, if that hadn't happened then, I wouldn't be here right now.
Absolutely.
You know, and you mentioned in that, and I wanted to come back to it, you know, things, because you've been around a while, you've been around 18 years, I said at the beginning, nearly 2 decades.
Yeah.
But I still need to work on stuff.
Yeah.
You know, so I suppose naturally the question is, what is that stuff that you kind of still need to work on? And I think that's really important for people to understand that, you know, you don't come into recovery, do a 12-step program, you know, and
I've gone through a number of things in recovery. I've gone through a number of things, and I'm going to mention them, but I also want to mention the things that I have also done outside of that, because that's important.
Yeah.
Because to think that recovery is just a struggle the whole time
No, it's
is a misunderstanding. And it, you know, if we're giving a message of hope, you know, to people, it's important that, you know, we be hopeful for them. But I've struggled with a lot of things, Dan. Clothing has been one thing. I started at the age of 16 when I got into football hooliganism. And it never stopped even in my addiction. I had to wear designer clothes all the time, Armani and you know, and Stone Island and Burberry, and you know, that never ever stopped. That was one thing that was with me. You know, I mean, I'm here in Thailand, everyone's wearing linen clothing, and I've got loads, and here I am with an aqua scooter, and, you know, and it's like, you know, it's still there, man.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, women's been another one. Not so much women, if I'm honest. I've been pretty good with women. It's probably worse for me now because I'm getting a lot of attention. You know, like I'm getting a lot of attention. Women are coming in my inbox all the time. You know, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but I have to manage it.
Yeah.
You know, because the thing that I suffer from, if I was to go really into that and do it for a prolonged amount of time, it would bring me to the same place drugs can.
Yes.
You know, and this is the thing to remember, isn't it? Because addiction is about obsession. Obsession, one thought that overrides all other thoughts. Compulsion. Compulsion, the acting out upon that thought. Born of self-centered fear. Well, what is the fear? The fear is that I'm not good enough. My inbox goes ding, dopamine reward, into that, get validation, which then gives my sense of dealing with I'm not good enough and I'm unlovable.
Yeah.
And therefore I want more of that, more of that, more of that, because what it's doing is telling me that I am okay. However, no amount of women, no amount of money, no amount of cars, no amount of anything, yeah, is going to make me feel good unless I start telling myself that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's the bit that I was saying to you at the beginning. The challenge with life for me is the ongoing journey of being open to learning new things, learning and developing. You know, like, because if I don't develop and I don't move forward, if I'm not going forward, I'm going backward. And at a point at which I'll go backward, that's when I get caught in that thing that I told about, which is obsession and compulsion.
Yeah.
It's tough, man. Like, recovery in itself, if we talk about a 12-step fellowship recovery, go to meetings, get a sponsor, work the steps, yeah, meaning and purpose and connection, all right? Okay, that sounds simple. Now go and apply it in everyday life, getting up for work, taking on family relationships, you know. I mean, the thing is, Dan, you'll know this, has your path got narrower?
Yes.
Hey, I mean, I love the fact it has, Because what's happened now is this spirit in me that we talk about, this thing that I've grown, this thing that's become different. I used to be able to walk like this, felt nothing.
Yeah,
Hurt
yeah.
this, hurt that, hurt him, hurt her, did it. Felt nothing, yeah? And then it's like, and then I come into recovery, honest, open-minded, willing, compassionate, loving, humility, acceptance, all these great things have become part now. Now they're in. And this is my compass. And then I start trying to walk like this. It's like,
Yeah.
like this. So it's like, it doesn't mean that I can't. It doesn't mean I'm not able. It just means that, okay, you go do what you want to do, Richard, and you'll suffer.
Yeah. It means when I go that way, and I like that. You know, they talk about recovery, the narrow path, and what that means is what it means to me. You know, is you know what, some bits I have to do on my own. You know, some bits, and that's that inside job stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
Can I ask you what that means to you in brief? Do you mind? Because I'm just seeing.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So the stuff I do on my own,
Yeah.
the inside job. What does that mean to you? I know what it means to me.
So it means you know, I have to challenge my own thinking. You know, I have to sit with my own feelings. You know, I have to realise that no one is responsible for the way I feel.
Okay.
I'm responsible.
Yeah.
And it's my job to get acceptance around it.
Yeah.
And it's my job to turn up correct.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
my response isn't based on something you did. My response is based on something that I've chosen to do.
Yeah.
You know.
It's an
always.
amazing thing to have that, isn't it? I mean, it's really, really hard to live spiritually the whole time. Yeah. But what a gift, you know, like we're so fortunate to have that. To have the awareness that nothing outside of us is the problem, but I am.
Yeah.
You know, you may say this, you may do this, I might not like it, and I'm feeling, but 100% of everything I think and 100% of everything I feel is 100% my responsibility. That's a power-based shift, you know. And the thing for me, and this is just one of the small things, it'll take me 10 seconds, 30 seconds.
Go for it.
The thing that I said before this started, right, is when I'm by myself, how am I talking to me? That for me is the biggest, that is the growth right there. You know, yes, you did something that didn't work, but come on, man, you're a human being, Rich. And from where you were to where you are today, you're doing amazing, and I love you. You know,
do you ever get
my head don't want to do that.
Nah, but do you ever get them days, man? You know, and I get them all the time. You know, this week for me in particular has been a week of being closed-minded and moving to open-mindedness and going. I'm trying to say it, you know, but I can't say it anyway. Do you know what, man? Sometimes to be aware, and I'm not from an egoic point of view, but to be self-aware and to be conscious. You know, it's like, God, this is tough, man. You know, but there's a beauty in it at the same time.
Yeah. Well, do you know, I've had my same sponsor for 18 years. I had someone do a few steps with me the last time I came out to Thailand, right? But I've had the same sponsor. Some parts of his life I might not want, right? That's the truth. But not because, you know, I just don't want. Not like good, bad, right, wrong, right? But do you know why I'm still attracted to the guy? Unconditional positive regard, love and humility.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
You just turn up as you.
Huh?
You just turn up as you.
Yeah, well, that's what I want from him.
Yeah.
He's so humble, so loving, and got unconditional positive regard. And I believe if I keep working with him and I'm around him, I'm going to have that for myself.
Yes.
That's what I want. That's what I mean, humility, man. It's such an attractive spiritual principle. When you meet somebody who's quite content with themselves, they just sit in themselves, you know. It's like, I feel sort of starstruck. You know, you don't have to own anything. You don't even have to have anything. You could be wearing rags. But if you can sit there in your own humility, you know, then that's, for me, that's very attractive.
Yeah. And you know, the idea of humility in this sense, what do you say, a friend of mine, Steve Henry, he talk about eating humble pie, and he says, the idea appears bitter, but the taste is very sweet.
Oh, I like that. I like that saying, yeah. I like that saying.
And you know, he said, and then he goes on to say, you know, when we do that, that's the God part of us.
Yeah.
You know, that's the good, that's the, you know, not the God of the universe or the higher power, but that's the God part of us that's within us. You know, I don't want to go too deep.
Well, no, I mean, the simplicity is this. Until we start loading the washing machine, so I mean, loading the child with all the laundry the core beliefs.
Yeah.
All there is God. And when I say all there is God, what I'm talking about is good orderly direction.
Yeah.
That baby's pure, that baby's in the now, they don't have any obsession, they have no compulsion, they have no stories. They're just present.
Yeah.
That is the pureness of a human being. And then we become an adult and we start then getting all this other stuff we do, obsession, compulsion. And I'm not talking about addiction, I'm talking about human beings.
Yeah.
You know, this is a human thing. That's
Yeah,
what we
yeah,
are, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things that makes monks or things like Buddha or Gandhi or, you know, people like this so attractive is the idea of just coming back to the innate sense of self. Because that innate sense of self is in us, because very often we use language when we're in recovery, the journey, that I just want to find myself. But there's nothing to find. There's nothing to find. We're actually already here. It's all here. We were born with it and it never went anywhere.
Yeah.
You know? It's like what's happened is we've just become something else to survive, you know, in the world. And what's happened is our true self is being shadowed by this in who we become to survive.
Yeah.
You know, in these behaviours. You start to change your behaviours and the move, and what you do is come back to yourself.
Yeah. So we're running out of time. There was so
Okay.
much I wanted to talk to you about. I just want to cover this maybe 5 minutes and then we'll have to wrap it up.
All right.
I don't even know if 5 minutes is long enough. Didn't you suffer a brain injury in recovery? Was that before you were in recovery?
No, I've had it all my life.
Had it all your life?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. My dad passed something on to me, and as a child I got a trapped nerve in the brain, and then that started disorientating the way that I walk, and then part of that is also loss of emotional control, and I don't know what that means really, because I've always been with it, you know. And then another part of it is the potential of dying of internal disease of an early age.
Yeah.
That growing up having that's been very difficult, you know. So I've always felt like I've had to overcompensate, be more, be ego, be tough, and this is why I got into clothes, this is why I got into football hooliganism, this is why I got into this is why I got into that. I had to be the best junkie, I had to sell the most drugs, I had to be seen, I had to have nice women, you know, because deep innate in me, I got, you know, right from being a child, I was deeply shamed. Not so much by other people, but from the events that happened around me and the messages I gave to me.
Yeah.
And it's important to say that, by the way, in all our, you know, because things are going to happen to us all the time, right? It doesn't mean that we have to believe that them events are going to be the thing that shape our future.
Yes.
And it's really, really important, because if we believe that everything that's happened to us and happening to us now is going to shape who we become in our present and in our future, we're a victim.
Yeah.
Because what we're saying is we're powerless. The reason I'm like this is because of that. No, the reason you're like this is because you're choosing now to be that.
Yeah.
That's the power.
You said something to me, and I apply this in my life, you know, and this is just one of the many bits of wisdom I've got off you since I've known you. You said, you know, if this is not personal, this is, you know, like life is not happening to you, it's just happening.
Yeah.
You know, and when stuff comes up in our life, you know, it'll be loss of a loved one, you know, loss of a partner, you know, or just general life, your loss of a job, you know, you lose your home, whatever, you know, this is not personal.
Yeah.
You know, life is just happening to us.
Yeah.
And that, so wrapped up in that, you know, there's the principles there, acceptance, do you know what I mean, humility, you know, and we could go on and go on. Yeah, do you know what, man? I had loads more questions.
Sorry, Dan, I don't know if I've...
No, look, we've covered some ground that we wouldn't have covered, you know, and I'm not in control here, man, you know.
Yeah,
and,
yeah, well, I just guess we go with what is right.
Absolutely, yeah. But do you know what, Rich? I really appreciate, because what you won't know is Rich came on and did a podcast previously. He had COVID. Obviously, we were socially distanced.
Not.
No,
we were.
But you know, despite having COVID, he still came and turned up and did the podcast. And you know, and we looked at it and we spoke and said, actually, you know, we could do something a bit more here based on what you said, and you felt you could bring more to the table, and you definitely have, mate. So I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing.
Yeah,
your
thank
wisdom.
you. There's a whole, you're right, Dan, there's a lot of questions I didn't do, but there's also a lot about, you know, And I think it is worth saying, you know, like from a using addict, doing numerous jail sentences, to having the opportunity that I've had during my recovery to work with street children in Peru, to teach English in the university in South America.
Yeah.
And I'd never done anything like that in my life. To have keys for 3 jails and lead contracts in jails, to lead nationwide services and over 51 services at one time. And I'm not saying this for any other reason, but just to say that the only thing that's ever stopped me from getting the life that I want is the nature of my own mind. Anything's possible in recovery. I've travelled the world, I've done some amazing things. I'm entirely grateful. And I'll end by saying that, you know, I've had to get myself out of bed every day for the last 18 years. And yes, I haven't picked up, but I want people to know that I haven't done this by myself. This isn't a me thing. You know, this is a we thing. It's really important, you know, because it's very easy to stand and blow our own trumpet, you know, like, but I would have probably used if it hadn't been for the people around me. Like, really, you know. So I'm grateful for that.
Richard, thank you again, mate. And I like what you said at the end, you know, and someone said that to me. No one's coming to get you. You know, this, you know, we're here when you get here, but you've got to get yourself here, man. You know?
Sure.
So, yeah, look, thanks for coming on, mate.
Thanks, Dan.
Appreciate it.
Cheers, man.
Lovely.